This is Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Nun Vav, and as we pick it up on the Mishnah on the bottom of Nun Hamid Beis, we like to dedicate today's shir as an incredible schos Rafua Shlema for Tinoik ben Miriam Ahuva b'siyata d'Shmaya the Koyach HaTorah Talmud Torah b'Rabim should continue bringing the ultimate Yeshuais, culminating b'siyata d'Shmaya and a Rafua Shlema Gemura for Tinoik ben Miriam Ahuva. We're holding on the Mishnah on the bottom of Nunhei Amid Beis, continuing to discuss the different Misais Bezdin, and we move on to Hamigadif. A Migadif, this is referring to one is Mavarech, euphemistically Mekalel, curses. Einoi Chayiv is not Chayiv ad sheyafarish Hashem. Says the Mishnah, this act of Kilol, this act of Megadef is not chayiv until he pronounces Yefarish as Hashem. He has to announce, he has to say the Shema Mefirash, and obviously in this negative sense. We look at the Rashi in the last line, Shiskars Hashem, Alim Shemi Pev. It doesn't actually say the name Elashama. Shem Piacher Ubarchai. Someone else says God Adoshem, and he just says the lashon of kilo, the lashon of curse. Then he is pater. Rav Yeshua ben Karcha teaches Rav Yeshua ben Karcha as we turn over to Nun Vav Amid Aleph. B'chol Yoim, each and every day, Danin Esa Eidim Bekinoi. Says the Mishnah, they judge when the Bezdin examines the Eidim, they do it Vikinoi. Then what? Yake Yoisi es Yoisi. Explaining the Mishnah, they asked the Eid, for example, when you said, when the one who's on trial says Yoisi, should he Yoisi, Nigmar Adin, but when the case is completed, Lo Hargin, Bekinoi. They don't execute him based on kinuyim. Ella, rather, moitziin kol adam lachotz. They take everyone outside. Shailin as hagadol shebeinayim, and the largest, the greatest dayan amongst all of them asks. Vaymer lein says him Amar Mashe Shamata b'feirosh. So we start off in a kinoi, not saying it explicitly, but then when we're at the moment of conviction, everyone leaves the Bezdin, and the Gadol of all the Dayanim turns to Eidim and says, tell us explicitly that which you heard, and he says the precise words. But Dayanim aimdim al ragleim, the Dayim stand to their feet, v'kairin, and they tear kriya v'loim achin, and they can never repair the clothing. Such a horrible act, having to hear the Shema Hashem, having to hear Kadosh Baruch Hu mentioned in such a light. The mere mention, even though it's done begeder eidos, they're telling it over. It's now we can understand. Maybe one would wonder why the Gemara says it in lashon of mevarich as blesses. Why we're always busy saying it in a lashon naki. We see even when the dayanim hear, they have to tear kriya, never repair such clothing. V'hasheni omer, and the second aid says, Afani kamayu, I heard the same as him. V'hashlishi omer, Afani kamayu, and the third aid says the exact same. So the process that we start off bikinoi, but then once it's nigmar adin and they're about to convict him, then everyone has to leave, because we don't want anyone to have to hear such horrible words aside from the Dayanim themselves. They hear the words and they tear kriya. Says the Gemara Tana, we learned in a braysa, Achi Yavarech Shem B'Shem. What we're referring to is, and again, whenever you use the word Yavarech, bless, it's euphemistic, Lashon Saginar. Of course, it means curse, it means yikalel. Says the Braisa, Chivarech, until one blesses Kadosh Baruch Hu's name, B'Shem, with the name of Hashem. Minani Mili, says the Gemara, from where do we know that is true? Amar Shmuel teaches Shmuel, the Amar Kram. Says the Pasik, the Amar Kram. V'noi Kev Sheim. V'gaimer b'nakvay shem yumas, one who's noikiv, who blasphemies the name of Hashem, when he blasphemes the name, he shall be put to death. Mimai, says the Gemara, how do we know that noikiv is lishta debruchi, is a form of klala? D'chsev, ma'ekev loikabe, says the pasuk kill. Ma'ekev asher curse loikabe, kill. Whom Hashem is not cursed. V'azarasai, and the Azaras mehacha lekim lo sekalel, asks the Gemara of Ema Mivraz, who, but maybe it means piercing the name of Hashem. How do you know it means yikalel? Maybe it means that if we have a pasuk and someone could actually cut the name, nakov, make a hole in the name with a knife. Vayikay v'chor v'delasai, as the pasuk says, and he made a hole in the lid. So we see the lashon of yikai means to make a hole. And the alzara would be from where? Vibatem eshamam, says the pasuk, that you shouldn't do like this to Hashem your God. So ask the Gemara, how do you know the lashon of yikal of noikev is the lashon of yavarich of yikalel? Maybe it means physically. Maybe it means making a hole in the parchment. Answers the Gemara, B'ina, shame b'shame, v'leka, from the double lashon, as we said, and noikev shame, b'nakvay shame, from the double lashon means you need to have a form of the shame being pierced with the shame, which only can be if it's done with the words. Ask the Gemara, wait, how do you know? Ve'ema demanach shnei shemos adalti. Maybe the pasuk referring to, there's two names on top of each other, two pieces of parchments. Ubazalu, and he goes and he tears them, and then we would see that it's an actual physical act. Answers the Gemara, who noikev v'chayzer v'noikevu. That's two separate actions. That's not one action. Says the Gemara, v'ema dechayik shema puma desakina. But maybe the case is one who engraves the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the edge of a knife, ubazaba, and he tears with it. Then you're tearing a parchment with the name of Hashem, with a knife of Hashem. So maybe that's a form of noikev shem b'shem. Says the Gemara, ha'ho chorfei desakino udekabaza. That is the sharpest of the knife that is tearing in, not the name of Hashem. And therefore says the Gemara from the pasuk of Noikiv Shem B'Shem has to be the name with the name, and must refer to saying and being Mekalel Mevarech the Shem Hashem with the Shem Hashem. Asks the Gemara, one second, maybe the pasuk refers to explaining the name of Hashem. D'chsev vayikach Moshe v'Aaron es hanashim ha'eleh shenakvu b'shem Moshe. Moshe and Aaron took the names who were nakvu, who specified their names. Azari me'acha. What would the Azara be of explaining the deeper esoteric meaning of Hashem Hashem as Hashem Elokecha Tira? Answers the Gemara Chad, number one, like we saw before. Tibi Ima, we need a fulfillment of again. Shem b'shem v'lek. Void, and number two, Avalei Azaras Asei. Vazaras Asei, Lo Ishmei Azara. That pasuk is a Asei, and that would not be a proper warning of Noikiv. Says the Gemara, Viba Yisema, second raya that Noikiv refers to talking in a derogatory, negative manner, Mavarich Hashem. Viba Yisema Amar Krav Yikaiv, says the pasuk Vayikalel. Says the pasuk, he pronounced and he cursed. Lamimar the noikev is chalala. From the pasuk, we see it explicitly. Vayika vayikala. That's referring to the same thing. Ask the Gemara v'dama ad avitarvayu. Maybe you have to do both. Maybe the pasuk is referring to the noikev and yikalel, two different actions. Answers the Gemara lo salgadait, the 8 lines of the y lines. The pasuk says, hoitzi es a mekal, take out the mekal, v'lo ksiv hoitzi es a noikev. That it all is one act, and that is the source for din number one. That is the source for hanoikev. That is the source for mekalel. One of the varich megadef, is chayim misa. Continues the Gemara Tanur Rabbanan ish. Says the pasuk, a man who curses matam v'loymar ish. The rabbi says, Akum Shemuzar and Al Birchas Hashem. This comes to include in akum, a guy who is warned against being mavarich al birchas Hashem ki Yisrael. He has the same azar like a yid. However, ve'ino nehargin, the guy will not be killed. Elu b'sayif, the guy would be killed by a sword beheading. Shkal misa amura b'minei nayach ino elu b'sayif, which really sheds a little bit light. Something we saw yesterday. We saw in the previous daf that there is a concept of a guy being chayim misa. Explains the Gemara today, but the chayim misa of a guy is always going to be b'sayif. Ask the Gemara, Nafka, do you learn this from here? Me'asam Nafka in the first white line. Says the Pasuk Hashem, Zuberchas Hashem. So Amar Rav Yitzchak Nafka, Loi Nitzricha Elo. L'Rabbi says Akinuyim comes to include the Kinuyim, all the other forms of the name of Hashem. Alibu D'Rameir, the Tani we learned in a brayso. Ish ki yekala ela likav v'nosachet, and he carries his sin. Mata molay marva lekvar nemar. We already had the pasuk we quoted to start today. V'nagiv shem Hashem ma'isumas. So lefi shem v'nagiv shem ma'isumas yachal yechayev ela al shem hamiyuchad bilvad. One would think that only chiyav is on the shem hamiyuchad. Menayim, from where do we know the rabbis call like Kinuyin? Tamad Laimar Ish ki yekala lelakav mikol makom divrei Rabbi Meir. Chachamim Aimrim al shem hamiyuchad b'misa b'akinuyim b'azhara. Upliga the Rabbi and the Chachamim hold that all the names are going to be azhar, won't have a chiyah misa. Says the Gemara, Upliga the sin of Yitzchak Navka. Pliga de Rebbe Miyasha. It's arguing Rebbe Miyasha. Tam Rebbe Miyasha says Rebbe Miyasha ben Noyach Shabirech as Hashem b'kinuyim l'Rabbanan Chayiv. According to the Rabbanan, is Chayiv Isa. My time, what's the reason? Damar Cross says the pasuk Ger Kezrach. Says the pasuk like a ger like an Ezrach. Now from here we learn out Ger ve'Ezrach udibina b'nak v'shem. Aval akom afilu kinu b'kinu in akom will be Chayiv, even for mentioning one of the other names of Hashem in this derogatory manner. V'Rameir, what does he do? So there is a different din, just a form of misa. Once they're included, they should have the same misa as a yid. Kamash Malon, that goyim gets sayif. For it's a nafcha leave the rabbanon. I can get ezrach my avdilei. Ger ve'ezrach hu de beinan shem v'shem. Aval akum loy beinan shem v'shem. But a guy does not need such a high level of being the varach l'shem with the shem Hashem. Says the Gemara. So Rameir held that is a chiyav even bekinoi by a guy. Explains the Gemara, ish ish lamali. Why do we need the pasuk of ish ish? Just the Torah speaks through that. People talk, therefore there's no limud from there. Tanu Rabbanan, and now we begin a sidebar discussion, quite a digression, which we're going to discuss the shivas and mitzvahs b'nei noyach. Once we're on the topic, and once we're talking about different chiyuvim by a guy, says the Gemara, Sheva mitzvahs testavu b'nei noyach. Goyim b'nei noyach are commanded 7 mitzvahs. On the last line of Nunvav and Aleph, what are these 7 mitzvahs? Says the Gemara, Dinim ubirchas Hashem. Says the Gemara, number 1 is Dinim, civil law. Number 2 is birchas Hashem. Number 3 is Avodah Zarah. Number 4 is Gili Arayis. They can't have any illicit relations. Number 5 is Shvichas Dami, killing. Number 6 is Gezel. Number 7 is Iver Min Achai. We turn over to Nunvavim and Beis. It continues the Gemara with other shitais of what precisely are the Shiva mitzvahs b'nei noyach. Rav Chananya ben Gamla oimer afal adam min achai, not just Iver min achai, but even from the blood from a live animal. Rav Chizka Amar says, Rav Chizka afal siros goyim are mechuyav even on siros from sterilizing both a person and an animal. Shemon Aimer Avala Kishab the Chayafor. Of Yesi Aimer Kolomer Barshas Kishab ben Ayach Muzar Alav Loyimatzei Becham Ever Benayu Bitai Beish. Says the Pasek, you should not found amongst you who pass his son or daughter through the fire. Kaisim Kisamim Ma'inin Ma'ache Umenachesh Umechashiv. V'choyver Chaver, and continues the Pasek, V'shayel Oivi Yedini V'derish Al HaMesim. Ubeglal, and because of Hatoiva Seila Hashem Elokecha Moirish Isam Mipanecha, Hashem will bequeath from you Moirish Isam Mipanecha. V'loy Anash will only be any punishment Elohim came his year unless the Ben Noach is warned. So what do we see? That not only is it the Shivas mitzvahs, the Gemara wants to add on all these other mitzvahs. Rav Elazar Omer Aval Kalayim Moishe Minei Noach. Even on Kalayim, Lilboish, Aval Kalayim. Gemara explains Mutar in Bnei Noach, Lilboish Kalayim. Well, Izraya Kalayim, Venisur Nelo Bahar Vohatz Behema, Ubar Kovas Elon. Says the Gemara, the Kalayim by a guy is not the same Kalayim as by a Yid. They could wear Shanis, they could plant Kalayim. The Isser is meeting two different species, as well as Harkovas or Elon, grafting one species of a tree onto another. Says the Gemara, Mina Hani Mili. What is the Mekar? We started off at the bottom of Amud Aleph with the Shiva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach, according to Tanakama. Says the Gemara, where do we know this from? Amar Rav Yochanan Damar Kravei Tzav Hashem Elokim Ala Adam Leimar. Hashem says, Marishan Mikol Eitz Agan Oichal Teyoichal Veitzav Elu. Veitzav, that word is Elu Adinim, that's civil law. Hashem Zubrich Hashem Chenu Oimer V'Nakiv Shem Hashem Mois Yumas Elikim Zu Abed Ischamim Chenu Oimer V'Leyilucha Elikim Achir Ala Adam Zu Shvichas Damim Chenu Oimer Shem Dam Adam Leimar, excuse me, Zu Gili Arayis Chenu Oimer, the first white line. Leimar Hey Nishalachas Ishtoi V'Alacha Me'it V'Alcha Me'itoi V'Haisel Ishacher Mikol Eitz Agan V'Loi Gezel. Says the Gemara, that's what we learn out, the Shivas Mitzvahs B'nei Noach. Ki also Rav Yitzchak on the third white line, Tana Ibucha, he said the opposite. Vaytzav zu over the Chavim, Elikim zu dinim. So Vishlam Elikim zu dinim dersev, and Ikrav Bayis Elikim. Ela Vaytzav zu over the Zara, my Masha, where do you see that the word Vaytzav means over the Zara? 5 lines down, Rav Chisda, Rav Yitzchak, Bar Avdimi, Chan Amar. We learn it from Surah Meir, Min Aderach, Sher Tivisem, Asu Lahem, V'goyim. Chan Amar, Shega Prayim, R'tzeis Mishpat, Kel Laholach, Achar Eitzaf. So 2 different other Pesukim we're going to learn now from. Says the Gemara, Mai Beinayu. What is going to be the practical nafka? Meaning, Beinayu, Akim Sha'asa V'dizara, V'lo Yishtacha V'lo. The guy made an Avodah but did not bow to it. Leman Damar Asu. According to Mandam, we learn out from the pasuk of Asu Mishas Asiya Mechai, from the ready the making, the creation of Mandam. Ki Ayol Oilech Ad Azal Basra, until you actually go after the idol and you actually worship it. Says the Upalach La and worship it. Amar Rava, continues the Gemara 1 second. Can it be? Are you telling me that there's a Mandamar that says a guy is going to be chayiv for the creation of a Zara, even without bowing down to it? Vatanya, we learned in a Bryce. That which Bezin would kill, Bnei Noach are warned. Ein Bezin Shayisam Misalem, so the Bezin will not kill for them. Ein Ben Noach Muzar Leim. Lemute Mai, what does this come to exclude? Lemute Akim Shazaf for the Zara. V'layishtacha Vala, which Bezin will not kill a yid for, so therefore a guy should not be included in the Azara. Amar Abba Lai Lemute Gifof Vinishok. It's coming to exclude embracing and kissing an idol, that a yid would not be killed for it, so a guy would not be within warning of it. Givok Vinishik Demai, says the Gemara. Embracing and kissing what type of idol? Ilim Kedarka. If you're going to say that's the way that you worship the idol, Barkatolu, then of course you're going to kill the yid. Must be in an abnormal manner, and therefore a yid will not be killed. And that's when the Ben Noach will not be within the Azhara. Continues the Gemara Dinim. What was the first of this Shivas B'nei Noach? Civil law. B'nei Noach, if good. Dinim B'nei Noach, are they really warned about it? Vatanya, Eser Mitzvahs in Zavi Yisrael B'mara. 10 mitzvahs, Klaisel God and Mara, Mamish is past week's Parsha. Shava Shekiblu Aleim B'nei Noach. V'yisiv Aleim Dinim V'Shabbos V'kivad Aveim. 7 plus 3. Dinim Dechsev Shem Shem Loi Chayk Umishvat Shabbos Kivad Aveim Dechsev Geshet Tivach Hashem Elikecha. Ve'amar Rav, and teaches Rav Yehuda Kasher Tzivcha B'mara. So says the Gemara, what do we see? We see Dinim is for We see dinim was commanded amara. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Avua, lo nitzcha ela leida ve'idim vehasra. The details that were added on Mara would not stam dinim, because it's true. Stam dinim all b'nei noyach are musar alav. Talking about the special dinim of a group of dayanim, edim, and warning. Ask Mayachim, Maiva Yosiva Aleim dinim. What's the extra dinim that are added on? Elam Arav Alei Nitzcha Elam Ledine Kinasais. Ask the Gemara, wait. Akati Yosiva B'dinim Yibayale. Something has to be added on. Elam Arav Acha Bar Yaakov Lenitzcha Laishav Bezdin B'Chopela Chopelach. The pasuk referring to add on a bezdin each and every town, each and every city, Chol Ir Ve'ir. Ask the Gemara, V'Bnei Noyach Lo Ifkid. Says Mara, but we're b'nei noyach not also commanded about Tanya. Kishem shenisav yisrael leishav batei dinim b'chol blach u'blach b'chol ir v'ir. Kach nisav b'nei noyach leishav batei dinim b'chol blach b'chol ir v'ir. So why do we need this pasuk? B'nei noyach were commanded as well. Elam Arava, Hi Tana. Tana devei ma'menashe hu demapik. Sitana devei ma'menashe demapik dalid chaf, who removes two dinim. Dalit is dinim and chav is blasphemy. They're not part of the Shevet Mishneh Noyach. Vayel samach ches, and he adds on samach sterilization, and kaf is kalayim. Because you're right, says the Gemara. Really, all dinim were not just for the Bnei Noyach. Says the Gemara, who is this Tana? The Tana of Menashe. Sheva mitzvah Bnei Noyach of the regular Aishich dam im ketzel even machai. And now he changes two of them. The Siros. Vike Layim Rav Yehuda Emer Adam Rishon Atzava El Alav Zar Bilvat Shavu Tzav Shem Lakim Al Adam Rav Yehuda Meseira Emer Aval Berachas Hashem V'Yishamrim Af Al Adinim. And some say it's even on a dinim. We're going to stop. Kamana Azlaha, one last line. Hadam Rav Yehuda Merav Lakim Ani Lo Sekalenu Lakim Ani Lo Semiruni Lakim Ani Yemoy Roi Alechem. Which she does this? Kiman ki yesh aimer. This goes according to the yesh aimer that all of these are referred to and learned out from Elikim. We'll stop over here and pick it up from Tanvei Menashe B'siyata Mishmaya.